Hi guys and welcome to episode 6 of the Northern Rugby podcast. On today's show we're joined by the Flying Dutchman Tim Visser, who we're very excited about. In today's podcast Tim tells us about how he was discovered in the Amsterdam Sevens tournament by Newcastle Falcons and how he was brought over to the Northeast to become part of the Newcastle Falcons Academy. He also discusses how Falcons coaches actually thought he was a back row player, so Tim found himself in scrums, rucks and mauls, which of course he was not a fan of. We talk about his move north to Edinburgh and his amazing try-scoring record in the Pro 14, as well as some standout games in those Edinburgh days, including an amazing 48-47 win over Racing Metro in the Heineken Cup. Tim also talks us through playing for the Barbarians and getting capped by Scotland, and what those experiences meant to him as well. Finally, we're going to chat through his move back to England with Quins and discuss the very controversial 2016 Challenge Cup final and hear what Tim had to say about how this game finished. So let's go ahead and get straight into it and hear Tim's thoughts. Hi, Tim. You all right, mate?
Hi, yes, I'm very good. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Very good. How's things been in 2020 for you so far?
It's not bad, actually. As for most people, lockdown was slightly boring, but luckily that was all it really was. Obviously sitting inside and being stuck for a couple of months and not really being able to do anything, then kind of going to your garden and exercise and barbecue isn't the worst thing in the world, but it does kind of get a bit monotonous after a while.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast with us. You're our first Dutch/Scottish guest, so thanks very much for that.
Oh, fantastic! The first and only one, I reckon.
Typically, what we do is we just have a very casual look back over your career and talk about the highs and the lows and try and unearth some hidden gems. So if you don't mind, just take us back to the start, how you got scouted by the Falcons, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, pretty unusual one, really. I was a youngster playing rugby in Holland and got invited at the time to play for a team called the Bulldogs, believe it or not, who were made up of English professional rugby players mixed with a bit of Dutch up-and-coming talent. So I got selected for that by the skin of my teeth because I was only 15, I think, at the time, or 16, wanted to, and actually too young to play senior rugby at Amsterdam Sevens. So I had to go to a sort of almost like a medical with the national team doctor for Dutch rugby, who luckily allowed me to play. And I ended up playing with James Grindle and Joe Shaw, two obviously very well-known names in the Northeast, but also Jamie Rennie, who was in the academy at Newcastle at the time, young boy, and actually ended up having a really good tournament. My first taste of senior rugby, albeit in a sevens format, but really enjoyed myself. Must have left a bit of an impression because Shawsey afterwards said, I'm going to speak to our academy manager about you because I think you deserve a chance to see what you can do in English rugby. So he therefore reported me to John Fletcher, another obviously very well-known name up north. And John gave me the immense chance to come on a trial week. So I came up that summer and spend a bit of time with the academy, watch the first team train and whatever else. And off the back of that, they offered me a place in the academy and opted to put me at Barnacastle School.
Very good.
So and it must have been tough for you, Tim, to actually come over at the age of 16 to a different country and pretty much on your own, and then try and make your new life over there, but as well being a professional rugby player and training and being educated in a foreign country.
Yeah, I think you're obviously very naive at that age, and I certainly was. It just seemed like a great adventure, and I just didn't see a reason why I shouldn't give it a go, which is a great way to look at it. But I was also very fortunate in that Newcastle had the foresight to put me at a school and a boarding school at that. So actually, I didn't just go from living with my mum and dad to having to look after myself. I went into, a pretty famous boarding school where I was essentially just looked after anyway. So, wake up at 7:00, put your laundry in, go to breakfast, school, rugby, homework, sleep, everything's taken care of. So, it was a very good sort of middle ground for someone of that age.
Good stuff. And you seem to break into the team pretty quickly. Obviously, I tagged you a few weeks ago in the Falcons graphic about the youngest debutants.
Yeah.
So what do you remember about your debut?
Not a whole lot, to be completely honest. I remember when I came over to England, I was 16, and I was a little bit slow to be a back. So John Fletcher kind of had a look at me, sort of tall guy, broad shoulders. Let's stick him in the back row. So I actually played a lot of my rugby at back row at school. And also when I joined the academy full time after school, I was considered a back row. So I was a 6/8. As you can imagine, any back that gets made a back rower hates mauling, hates rucks. I absolutely hated scrummaging. But lucky for me, in that first season, there was quite a few injuries on the outside backs. I think, I'm not exactly sure, but John Rudd was injured. Someone else was injured. And they kind of just looked around the room and thought, who else could fill in a wing?
Yeah.
And I guess, I was quite fortunate in that Rob Andrews signed me, but John Fletcher quite quickly in my first season, in pre-season actually, took over as first team coach. So he knew I was quick enough to play on the wing. I developed a bit of speed within that time. And they said, well, have a go at this. And I remember the training session where they said it, and the forwards were just about to do line-outs and mauls. And I looked at the back. The backs were shining each other's shoes. I think, right, I'm going to go over there, which was just, being set free, which was absolutely phenomenal. But I then went away with the first team. It might have been Glasgow. We had a warm-up game somewhere where I played a little bit on the wing, didn't really get to do much. And then there was an injury for that first game of the season against Worcester. So I think Tom May was on the wing, and I got a chance on the bench, which in itself was incredibly nerve-wracking for someone of that age. I think I was 18 or 19 as you illustrated last week. Sorry. I remember sitting on the bench, and then we were losing really quite heavily, and I think Fletcher just thought, oh, he might as well throw Tim on, see what happens, kind of thing. And as I came on, we kind of started working our way back into the game. I think there was one or two tries, and I'd got my hands on the ball a couple of times, made a couple of yards here and there, nothing too special. And then with actually no time left, Matt Burke got the ball on the outside, made it a 2-on-1, put me away, and I had a one-on-one with Garvey, the Worcester winger, at the time, and it just felt like sevens again. And it was always kind of my speciality to finish stuff off one-on-one, and I think throughout my career that was one of my strengths. If you give me the ball one-on-one, especially with a player on an angle, I would finish it 9 out of 10 times. And it was just instinct to step back inside, went over the try line, scored, but had no idea that there was no time left. So I remember jumping back up and wanting to run back to halfway. I was like, oh, let's, we need to win this. We're not ahead. I had no idea what the score was. I was just happy to be there. And I remember that there's actually a picture somewhere of Phil Dowson grabbing me and pointing at the clock, and there was actually no more time left. So not only had I scored on my debut, I'd also scored the winning try, which was really quite special. And I just remember afterwards, speaking to Sky Sports and whatever else, and then finally after about half an hour, picking up my phone, and everyone had seen it. I must have had 100 texts, everyone from school, but also all my friends back home in Holland, because they would have had Sky and they were able to watch it. I called my dad, and I kind of felt like I had to try and explain it. I was like, "You're not going to believe what just happened." He goes, "No, I know exactly what just happened. I've been watching." Yeah, I mean, it was just a whirlwind, and it was it couldn't have gone better for me.
Yeah, I actually remember that game. I had a season ticket in the North Stand because it was in that sort of northwest corner. I think
Yeah.
you brought it, yeah. Yeah, because it was a pretty awful game up until that point. So
shocking.
It's obviously a great moment for you, and you probably think at that point you're going to break into the team and move forward. But you were kind of in and out, and you did a couple of loan spells as well. So what were your thoughts around the loan spells that you did?
I think the loan spells were probably slightly over-exaggerated. I was a young player, like you said, I made my debut. I think I scored in my first 3 games and then kind of discovered the nightlife in Newcastle, got distracted here and there, thought I'd made it, like a lot of young boys at that age would have done it. But also John Fletcher got fired, which didn't help. John was always a big believer in me. I still think he's one of the best coaches I've ever had, especially one-on-one coaching. He was at my wedding. I still try and keep in touch with him. And when I was down at Quins, I would see him every now and again when he was visiting young Quins players in his capacity with England. But Steve Bates took over. I wouldn't say Steve and I got on very well, but also, Steve was in a difficult position in that he was trying to keep a team up in the Premiership and perform with, a limited amount of players, a limited budget, whatever else. And he needed the finished article and not, a young winger like myself that didn't really know how to defend or attack like a winger, but was, pretty good with the ball in hand. And I think, after a while, you obviously get found out. You can't just switch positions from the forwards to the backs in the Premiership and perform week in, week out, and actually do a solid job, especially when you play against some of the best teams in the Premiership. And I probably got found out a bit. Came in and out, played when needed, and like any young player at Newcastle, if you weren't selected for the first team, you could go and play, or you were expected to go and play with one of the close teams. So I played a bit for Tyndale, which was great fun. I still speak to a few of the guys there. Went back to Mowden Park for a bit, but again, they call it loan, but it's just whenever you weren't selected, you could go and get a game there, just like any other club would make you do. Which I really enjoyed. I played for Mowden Park when I was still at school as a youngster, and being able to get back there a bit and playing was brilliant. I did have a proper loan spell at Northampton Saints at one point.
Yeah, I did come across that. I can't recall it at all. Was that was there in the Championship?
Again, it was only about 4 weeks, and it was when Chris Ashton had just signed for Northampton, and they were in the Championship. And Chris, coming from rugby league, had no idea. He had literally no idea. And I came over to kind of fill the gap a little bit until they could, explain to him how it all worked. But, as soon as he figured it all out, he was electric. And, still obviously playing at the highest level for Harlequins now. Great player. But he just needed a couple of weeks to kind of get used to that. So I had about 4 weeks with Northampton in the Championship, which again was good fun, good experience. Lived down there but for a bit and played about 4 or 5 games until Ashley figured out how to play rugby. And then got to the end of my contract, which I'd signed under Fletch. And I remember I went to see Batesy, and we kind of had a look at each other, and both pretty soon figured out that this wasn't going anywhere. Which was, my departure to Edinburgh.
Yeah, and when that time came, was Edinburgh your only destination, or were there other teams in England?
It was a bit of a weird one because, being a Dutch national, I actually ended up playing for England under 18s at school because it's England schools, and I was at an English school. Apparently, that's the only prerequisite for you being able to play. And then I also got selected for the England Intermediate Academy subsequently when I was about to start getting qualified for England. And, don't get me wrong, I was nowhere near an England team, obviously. But that was quite a big date because after spending 2 years at school, which don't count towards that. I had 3 years with Newcastle, and so I theoretically qualified to play for England the day I moved to Scotland, which was a bit of a weird one. But that in contract negotiations, that's really important, because even more so now, Premiership club want players that are eligible for England for various reasons, not just financially, but also because they're obviously in England. Mm-hmm. And I got a couple of nibbles from, I think it was Leicester at the time, maybe Gloucester, but just not quite what I wanted. No real serious contracts, or too short. And I remember speaking to my agent, and he said, "Well, Andy Robinson has moved up to Edinburgh, after he was England coach, and he obviously knew about you because you were in the England academies, and he said he would love to have you up there." So I drove up the road. I remember my missus was doing her law exams at Newcastle at the time, so we drove up the A68, windy and everything as it is, and she was trying to revise and scribble stuff down for exams, which you can't imagine went very well. Got lost in Edinburgh and eventually saw Murrayfield from afar and kind of made it to the stadium, and just had a real good chat with Andy. Again, fantastic coach, completely different from what Fletcher was. Fletcher was an amazing manager, very good on the pitch in actually guiding young talent as to what they should be doing, whereas Andy was very much director of rugby type, steering his coaches, but nonetheless had a great chat and got introduced to a guy called Rob Moffat, which is, he could be Fletcher's twin, very similar, Scottish twin, may I say. Very similar, very good on the pitch with young players, and just, got hooked by his story and what he saw from me and what he wanted. And, obviously coming to Murrayfield, big stadium, facilities were second to none. Edinburgh just finished second in the league. I was like, right, well, this sounds like a great idea. So I went up to Edinburgh, signed a 2-year deal, which later was dubbed as a project player pathway thing, but it really wasn't. I was just a young player that needed a job, and ended up signing for Edinburgh, which was really really cool at the time.
And what were your kind of first impressions of Pro 14? Because I assume you didn't really watch much of it, or did you at the time?
No, I had no idea. Down south or south of the border, there is no. You don't see the Pro 14. Obviously now Sky took it over for a while, so you saw it for a bit, but back then I had no idea. I obviously knew that, Munster, Ulster, Cardiff, the big teams were in it, but I had no idea how it worked. But, that didn't really come into my mind. I think I went to see the club. The facilities are great. The coaches are great. I got offered a really good contract. I was like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea.
Something obviously clicked, because obviously from 2010 to 2013, for those 4 seasons, you're the top try scorer every year. You scored 48 tries, which is sensational in 4 years. So what was it about Edinburgh that just kind of clicked with you?
Well, first of all, they believed in me. I started playing almost straight away, and I also started delivering straight away, which made that relationship a little bit easier. But I think the way Edinburgh played, they were a very dominant team, but they played the ball around quite a lot. We didn't have huge forwards, which meant that we had to play the ball around. There was a big focus on skills, but it also meant that the wingers got a lot of ball in their hands. So, as probably is the red line through my career, I'm very good with the ball in hand, and the more of it I get, the better results I tend to get. So I got a lot of ball. They just finished second in the league, and again that first season we were pushing for top 4 really quite easily. I think we were second in the league at Christmas, and then dropped off ever so slightly. We were playing Heineken Cup rugby. Edinburgh were a good team, and it suited my my style of playing.
Yeah, and there's 2 games specifically that I wanted to ask you about that I remember very well. One of them was in the 2012 Heineken Cup season, the epic game against Racing Metro you played at Murrayfield.
The roller coaster, yeah.
Yeah. Still to this day, one of the best games I've ever seen. Just what were your thoughts on that?
Oh, I mean, it's absolutely crazy. I remember we obviously, the French. Bear in mind, Racing weren't that dominant at the time. They had Chabal and they had a couple of other big guys, but they're not the Racing that they are nowadays. And they came to Murrayfield, and I remember Andy Robertson saying beforehand. At that point, he was Scotland coach. He's like, these are the games where I want to see you step up in. We would love for you to come and play for Scotland, but I need you to prove that you can do it. And I must have had one of the games of my life at this point. Everything was clicking. I was playing with a centre partnership who were just literally throwing with the ball every opportunity they got, and we started scoring tries. I think I scored a try within the first couple of minutes of the game, but again, Edinburgh weren't that good defensively. We were all about scoring tries. If they scored 4, we would score 5, and that's how we'd win games. And obviously, Racing French threw the ball around and also started scoring. And very quickly, our grip on that game disappeared. And I remember we were in the sheds at half time, and I don't know who it was. It might have been Moffat or Greg Laidlaw, one of the captains, said, when we come out for the second half, we need to score first. Otherwise, we're absolutely gone. And we went out, and the first thing that happened is they scored another try. So at this point, we're, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 points behind. And it was kind of just, balls to the wall, like just play everything. Don't kick anything away, just play. And we started scoring. And again, not with not long left to go. I got the ball on the left-hand side. There was just a little bit of an overlap. I threw a dummy and I managed to score the winner. But, at this point, it's 56-55 or something like that. Unbelievable score, like a cricket score almost. But yeah, absolutely knack. I remember how tired we were afterwards, just trying to run everything. But yeah, we'll always be remembered as one of the most probably miraculous games I've ever played in.
Absolutely. And the second game I wanted to ask you about is the semi-final, because I'm an Ulster fan. I'm a Belfast lad.
Yeah.
But I remember that game, and I remember being horrendously nervous beforehand.
Yeah.
What's it like being so close to the final and playing in a match which is pretty much 50-50?
Yeah, it's strange. It didn't feel like that at the time. We were incredibly dominant that Highland Cup season. We were terrible in the league. We were something like 10th in the league, couldn't put a string of results together. But in the Highland Cup, we just turned it on. And when we kind of got towards that qualification point and also that quarter-final, our team was just geared towards the Highland Cup. They would send bomb squads into the league, knowing there is no relegation, and save all of us for the Highland Cup. So, bearing in mind, we had the biggest domestic crowd for a European quarter-final at Murrayfield the week before for the Toulouse game. And a big, strong, dominant Toulouse team came over to Murrayfield in front of something like 38,000 people, and we absolutely thumped them. Like we went through them like a steam train. We didn't even try to play rugby. I think what we said is their back three are terrible under the high ball. We're kicking everything. Everyone just run after it, and within the first couple of minutes of the game, someone put up a bomb. We all just ran after it, nailed the guy, dropped it, and Mike Blair scores the first one. And the whole game was just like that. It's crazy. And, to then, I think that was almost our final, to win that game against Toulouse. We then went over to Ulster full of confidence, but, they were so strong. They were physical. They were well organised. And I think the result was only a try difference in the end, but that really was skewed by a late try from us. We were under the pump the whole game, never felt like we were in that game whatsoever. And, this was, and, don't get me wrong, Ulster still dominant, but this was when Ulster were, very dominant in Europe. And, even though that result looked a lot closer, we never had a chance of getting to that final. As soon as we knew that as soon as we were about 10 minutes into that game, I'd say.
Yeah, and I mean, you said there that the Toulouse game felt like your final. Like we beat Munster at Thomond Park in the quarterfinals, and that kind of felt like our final as well.
Yeah.
So
Who went to the final that year opposite Ulster?
Leinster battered us.
Yeah.
So
just same story again, isn't it? Leinster,
yeah.
Leinster.
It seems to happen every time we play them, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So Tim, you then went on to play for the Barbarians. I mean, they are the most special club in world rugby, and potentially sport, just because of who they are, their values, what they stand for, and just bringing together a bunch of rugby legends and throwing them out on a rugby field for a week together. And what's that like to be a Barbar and then obviously to score a couple of tries against England as well must have been quite nice. But what was that sort of week with them like?
I mean, easily the best rugby week of my life, I'd say. I remember getting the call. So I was obviously the uncapped player in that campaign. They always tend to take one player who isn't capped.
Yeah.
And I remember getting the call from my agent. I was on holiday in Marbella with a couple of friends, and this was 3 weeks into the off season. So I had probably been on the pump every night for 3 weeks at this point. And he calls me and he goes, "Mate, someone's dropped out of the Barbas. They'd love for you to come." And initially I said, "No way." I said, no bloody way. I'm not going. I've been on it for about 3 weeks now. I'm not fit. I can't do this. And he goes, "Mate, have a think about it and then call me back." So I called my dad. I was like, "Dad, they want to go play for the Barbars. I'm not quite sure. I'm absolutely hanging. What do you think?" And he literally said, "You're going." He says, "You're 100% going." So I end up coming back from this holiday, a couple of days early, fly down to London, and it's just a whirlwind. You rock up, you have a huge bag of stash. Everything's paid for the whole week. So, we arrived on the Monday. We didn't play till the Saturday. Everything's paid for the whole week, going out, nightclubs, restaurants, and, players go out. We were, I think I was drunk every day. There was a couple of players who were drunk the night before the game. We had a team run in Hyde Park, and Freddie Michalak pulled out a couple of bottles of champagne to toast the fact that we had such a great week, which was the day before the game. So all sipping champagne the day before the game. During the game, they asked him, "Freddie, what do you want for in your bottle when you're taking goal kicks?" And he goes, "Champagne, please." So if you go back into that game, when he takes conversions, there's a kit man running on with a white Servier draped over his arm and a bottle of champagne and a flute, and he drinks champagne during the game. It's absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, we had a fantastic. I think we trained, or we tried to train twice. It was, Bastero couldn't run. He was so drunk the day after. It was we hardly got any training in, and I remember literally before we went to the stadium, there was a last team meeting like you normally have. Normally you'd go through last bits of video or talk through the game plan again. So we're all sitting there, and bearing in mind this is 11 o'clock day of the game, and suddenly it was actually Mickey Steele-Budge, who sadly passed away now. He was obviously chairman at the time, and he stood up. He was like, "Right, guys, we've all had a fantastic time, great week together, but one amongst us has taken it too far, and we've unfortunately had to call the police." I knew exactly what was going on straight away because it was my birthday that day, and so the lights go out and these sirens come on, like woo woo woo, and these two horrific Brazilian strippers come in, and they go, "We're looking for Mr. Visser," and I was like, "Oh fuck no!" So in front of the whole squad, bearing in mind some of my rugby legends in there, Parise, Michalak, Bastero, Carl Heyman, name it. It was a star-studded team. They tie me to a chair, ladle me in baby oil, and literally slap their breasts around my face and God knows what else. I was covered in baby oil. if you see during the game, I actually drop a ball pretty early on, which I'm pretty sure was because my hands were still really slippy. But, just stuff like that. Like, you couldn't make it up. It was absolutely brilliant. And then to play against an England team which had quite a few players in it, which were still trying to play themselves into a World Cup was quite special. And, to score 2, but also to score the winner again, with not much time left was phenomenal.
So, the beauty about it is it goes back to like the amateur days, doesn't it? Where it's just about, a group of 30 lads just having some drinks, having a good time and throwing a rugby ball around and not sort of taking the game too seriously and actually just sort of going back to your roots a little bit.
And then beating England at Twickenham. And they actually beat Wales at the Millennium the week after as well.
Yeah, it's the cherry on the cake, isn't it? So you were uncapped at the time when you played there. Obviously, you had Scotland coming for you as well. Was there ever a point in your career where you thought, I'm going to represent Holland, or were you always sort of?
There was. I think first of all, that Barbas game was a pretty important milestone for me as a player, without noticing it at the time. But the media were all keeping a pretty tight eye on whether I could actually deliver at the international stage. So that the fact that I scored 2 in what's dubbed as an international game was a big moment for me looking back. But obviously I didn't really realize this at the time, probably due to my alcohol levels. But when I left Newcastle in 2009, that was actually the year, I said this earlier, where I qualified to theoretically play for England. And I hadn't played for Holland due to the simple fact that I left Holland, as a 16-year-old boy. So when I lost the theoretical chance to qualify for England, we did start speaking to Holland again, me and my dad. My dad's represented Holland 67 times. My little brother has now played 50 times for them, I believe. We are very closely involved with Holland still. I'm not, but my family are. We did start talking to them a little bit. I expressed my interest. If I couldn't play for England, again, I was nowhere near playing for England, but theoretically I would have been able to. Of course I wanted to play for Holland. It's my country. The big problem being that Holland at the time were very low in the rankings. They're doing good at the moment. They're a lot higher up, but this meant that their games were almost always played not during the conventional international periods.
Right.
So they would clash with Edinburgh games. So therefore, I actually never ended up playing for Holland. And very later on, I ended up playing for Scotland again. Due to the fact that I'd never played for Holland, which, looking back, is a very important decision. Even though I didn't feel like it at the time, I just didn't play for Holland because it clashed with my Edinburgh games.
And what was it like then making your debut for Scotland? How did that feel?
Oh, it was impressive. It was unbelievable. I was quite lucky to make my debut away against Fiji. I say lucky, it's not that lucky because it was 38 degrees. It was absolutely boiling. But it meant that I could do it under the radar. I didn't have the pressure of being at Murrayfield with 67,000 fans. But it was a very conscious, important moment in my career, in that the media had been speculating for years about, as soon as I started doing well for Edinburgh, they found out that I never played for Holland. The speculation started, is he a project player, blah, blah, blah. And, again, I wasn't, but they started linking me to Scotland pretty early on. And therefore there was a big road leading up to this first cap. And I think, in rugby, international rugby is the pinnacle of anyone's career. So I think, going away with Scotland and sitting out the first game against Australia because I wasn't qualified yet, and then finally, getting to the point where I was going to make my debut against Fiji. I just remember standing on the pitch and just wanting the anthems to finish and and the whistle to go so that I could call myself an international rugby player. So yeah, that was a very important moment, but also very consciously so for me.
Yeah, and your debut obviously went very well, two tries against Fiji, but your home debut must have been something special.
I seem to always have had the luck of being able to turn it on during some of these really special moments, and I think scoring away twice against Fiji was amazing. Scoring twice on your debut is a dream come true, but it's under the radar. You're away. The game was in the middle of the night in the UK. I think my parents were in a local pub somewhere, which they managed to keep open till 3 a.m. to watch it. But then making your home debut against the All Blacks, it's a different story. And I remember, unfortunately, Andy Robertson told me about 2 months before the game that he was going to start me against the All Blacks. So I was nervous for about 2 months straight. Every night I had weird dreams about being late for the game and God knows what else. And when we finally got to it, it was really quite special for a number of reasons. Obviously, making my home debut in front of the Scottish fans, I felt very welcomed by everyone in the country. I felt part of the country, and I still do. I live here again now. But also when the bus entered the stadium, it does this traditional drive around the stadium to the changing rooms, which are on the west stand side, which is the other side from where you come in, and you get guided in by the Piper band playing, doing their thing. So you drive really slowly, and all the fans stand on either side and walk with the bus. But because I'd started making quite a lot of waves back home in the media in terms of what I was doing over here in rugby, a lot of Dutch people started coming over to Edinburgh games or whatever else, but they'd obviously got wind of the fact that I was going to make my home debut against the All Blacks. So when I looked out of the bus, there must have been about 100 Dutch supporters all dressed in orange walking along the bus and just shouting at me. And it, for some reason, that got really emotional. It really got me, because it was kind of this symbolic moment from leaving Holland to playing for Scotland. And I remember when we were singing the national anthems, I looked up and high up somewhere in the West Stand, there was this huge crowd of Dutch people, and they had this huge Dutch flag, which must have been about 5 meters long, and right in the middle of it was "Good luck with your debut, Tim Visser," something like that. I can't exactly remember what it was, but it was just so symbolic. And then again, if you ask anyone in Holland about rugby, half of them have never heard of the sport or think it's played with helmets, but they all know the All Blacks. That is, it's the pinnacle of anyone's career, playing against the All Blacks. And then, as a Dutch young boy, to come over here and have that whole journey of making it to international rugby for your adopted country, but then to also score against what's undoubtedly the best team in the world twice is incredibly special. And again, something that I didn't realize at the time. You just scored 2 tries. Yeah, great, fantastic. Let's have a beer. Who's next, kind of thing. But looking back on that was really amazing.
So I mean, it's fantastic, that first game, first home game against New Zealand, and then you went on to score a couple of tries in the Six Nations as well. But then sort of moving forward to actually go to a World Cup in 2015, that must have been special, and sort of having that journey that Scotland went on. And I mean, everyone knows what happened in that that quarter,
yeah,
which even as an Englishman, I was a bit I felt a bit bad for the Scots that day, but that was an incredible journey. What was it like, sort of being in a World Cup, but more so being in a World Cup in England as well? Was that an extra incentive to go to, to come down to England and really
I think so. Again, there's a whole story that leads up to this. For me personally, there've been quite a few coach changes at Edinburgh, and we ended up with Alan Solomons, who currently coaches Worcester, who again, is a great stand-up guy. Very honest, very direct, which as a Dutch person I really appreciate, but just didn't see rugby the same way I did. I hardly got any ball. My try scoring records dropped off a cliff those seasons, and it actually meant that I started losing. I had a bad injury in 2013. I broke my leg, which didn't help. But when I came back from that, I just couldn't really show what I could do. I never really got much ball. We didn't play the kind of rugby that Edinburgh used to play. And I started losing. I lost my Scotland starting spot, really. I think it was actually quite special, the fact that I made that World Cup squad. I came off the back of a couple of very challenging seasons where, again, like I said, I couldn't really do what I used to do. And then to go into that, make the initial squad was brilliant. That was the first step. And, luckily I really shone in the warm-up games. I scored 2 tries against Italy. I played really well against Ireland away and managed to get into that squad, which was not really a given for me at the time. I had really dropped back in the pecking order. So to make that, first of all, was a huge achievement for me personally. But you don't realize how big World Cups are. It is rugby on steroids. It is huge. And the fact that it's in England on home soil is just magnifies everything for the Scots. We played one of our games in Gloucester, and then we moved up north, and there might have as well been home games for us. We played at Leeds, where, the majority of the stadium was filled with Scots. We went up to St James Park for our last 2 games, and it was just like being at Murrayfield. It was brilliant. The towns got painted blue, and it was amazing. It was just, it's like being in a tiny fishbowl full of rugby non-stop around you, and there's a lot of pressure on you, and luckily we delivered. I played against the USA. I scored. I played against South Africa, in which I played quite well, I thought. But we lost that game. And then, due to selection, I missed out on the last game against Samoa, which we won to qualify. And they essentially went with the same team for the game against Australia. And, we all know what happened. I was in the stands, and it was literally... The roller coaster was phenomenal. I was sitting in stands, and one moment I felt like, wow, we're going into a semi-final. The next moment I'm off and I'm starting my rugby career at Quins, because I'd signed at Quins at the time. And our preparations for that game against Australia, we were based at the Quins training ground, so 10 minutes from my new house. My wife had just recently had our first boy, so she just moved down there. As we went down to train there, she moved down with the movers, and everything got moved in. And it ended up that we lost that game on a pretty sour note. And the next morning I jumped in my car and moved on to my new life with Quins within the space of 10 minutes.
Yeah. And the Quins decision, I imagine, after your Edinburgh career and everything you've done there must have been quite a few teams after you, based on your try scoring record alone.
Yeah, there was nothing more interesting than Quins, for sure. There was a lot of interest from France, but again, the French teams at the time kind of demanded that you stop playing internationally, which I wasn't ready to do. I got an offer from Japan, which was incredibly lucrative, but again, that you can't play for Scotland. There was other clubs in the Premiership who were interested, but just meeting Conor O'Shea was inspirational. Again, it was like a John Fletcher moment, I call it. I met him and we had a chat. I literally flew into Heathrow, met him at Heathrow, and then flew back a couple of hours later. And the influence or the impression he left on me was incredible. I remember saying to him, bearing in mind I came from an Edinburgh side at the time who weren't playing any rugby, we're kicking everything away, we're just defending constantly. And he said, the way we play rugby is so ingrained at Quins. We are such an attacking side that we'd rather lose a game than deviate from the way that we believe rugby is to be played. And literally my ears pricked up, and I was like, I'm coming. I don't care what you're offering me. I'm coming. Yeah. And they offered me a good contract, 3 years. During which Conor O'Shea, moved on to Italy, which was a real shame. But I had a great time at Quins. Made friends for life. It's an incredible club. World class facilities, world class setup. It's like being with an international team week in, week out. The setups and everything they have and use and possess is phenomenal. And I signed at the same time as Jamie Roberts and James Horwell, two huge international names, and we became really good friends. And actually, we probably, looking back, we probably underperformed a little bit. The quality we had in that Quins team, all the England players from Chris Robshaw, Danny Kerr, Joe Marler, to the other internationals like myself, James Horwell, Jamie Roberts. It was just from 1 to 15. Sometimes we could put out a full international team from 1 to 15. And I think regrettably it probably had a lot to do with the fact that Connor was leaving. We were doing really quite well until he decided to move to newer ventures with Italy. But I had a great time with Quins.
Yeah, and there's one game in particular that I wanted to ask about. I think you might know what it's going to be, but it's the Challenge Cup final in 2016. Yeah. And this game, it actually popped up on my YouTube feed the other day because I'd forgotten what happened at the end of it. But just tell me what that's like as a player, like with how that game ended. What goes through your mind?
I mean, bearing in mind again that there's a story leading up to this, because I lost that same final the year before with Edinburgh against Greg Laidlaw at the Twickenham Stoop, my new house, my new ground. And so I've been to the final, I've lost it. Anyway, we have got a great European Challenge Cup campaign with Quins the year after. Again, who do we play in the final? Montpellier,
yeah.
Yeah. Who we'd absolutely trashed in the group stages. So we went into that final thinking we're gonna actually bump these guys. And fair play to them. They learned hugely from that first game. Didn't try to play rugby against us and just kicked high balls non-stop. I must have had about 20 high balls on me from a player called Dimitri Kaskilis, who later came to Quins.
Yeah.
And he, I remember him saying when he arrived, he said, our whole strategy was just to kick high balls on you guys and run after it. Essentially, what we'd done in the Heineken Cup years ago with Edinburgh against Toulouse, which completely changed the way they starved us of ball, just kicked high balls, ran after it, and just didn't play rugby. Completely killed the game. But anyway, we've kind of managed to get ourselves back in it. And a player called Ben Potbotica had signed for Montpellier the year after, so he's leaving Quins. And he comes. He's leaving the season after to go to Montpellier, but he comes on with about 10 minutes to go in this final. So bearing in mind that he sat on the bench for the whole games, knowing exactly what the score is, knowing how much time's left on the clock, he comes on a couple of actions. Nothing special. We still play rugby, but we are, 6 points behind or something like that. We could win it with a try essentially. And there's a turnover probably somewhere on the 22, 10 meters maybe. And I looked ahead of me. There was an enormous overlap, but also time was dead. The clock was dead. Every single player on the pitch knew that. I mean, I never look at the clock and I knew it. And Mike Brown, myself, I think one of the other wingers over on my side, and we're screaming for the ball. And bearing in mind that Quins was ingrained to play rugby from anywhere on the pitch. We did not kick the ball away. We'd rather die with it than kick the ball away. And he puts it on his boot, probably one of the longest kicks I've ever seen him kick, into Montpellier's dead ball area. And I remember their fullback was just dropped on it, fell on it, killed the game, and was just laughing. He was like, "What have you guys just done?" And there was a whole sort of charade of Ben falling onto the floor and punching the floor as in, "Oh, what have I done?" kind of thing. But it's just, it could have been by accident. I just find it hard to believe.
So it's one of those things that you're in a cup final. It's is it the occasion that's got to someone? Is it other reasons? But as a winger that stood there looking at an overlap, and you've sort of trained your whole career, your whole season is up to that point. Do what was sort of the changing room like after? Were there people putting their arm around him, or were there people that sort of left that game with some bad blood because of what had happened?
I don't know. And, in his defense, he'd done stuff like that before. We played game against Northampton where I was in the stands, where, we were winning with a minute to go, something like that. We had a scrum on our own line, or on the 5 meters line, and the ball comes out, and the time is dead. And instead of just kicking it out behind him or kicking it out anywhere on the pitch, he tries to go for a really long touch finder, and Northampton catch it. Ben Foden scores on the other side of the pitch, and we lose. So, he did have a bit of a history of doing silly things like that. And, if you look at it objectively, why, if he's going to Montpellier, what has he got to gain from letting them win the final? Surely he'd want to win and come on a good impression kind of thing. But it just felt so double, and I was fuming. I didn't look at him again. But yes, I'm sure some of his mates, put their arms around him. He did look gutted and whatever else. But it's just silly. It's just, it robbed me of a second chance to win the Challenge Cup, because I'd lost it the year before as well.
Tim, your time at Quins then comes to an end. You call time in your career, which a lot of people think you kind of did it too soon. So what were your thoughts on retirement? Did you have this plan all along to quit when you were younger?
I did have a plan. I think when I left Edinburgh, I signed a 3-year deal with Quins, which took me to 31. I'd always said to myself, if I make 31, I would have done a pretty good job, starting my professional career when I was 18. That's pretty good going, and I got to 31, and I was still playing week in, week out, still performing really well for Quins. So I signed another 2-year, and I was like, right, well, these are my bonus years. After this, I'll definitely stop. My knees started grumbling a little bit. I needed an operation, bits and bobs. And I'm always a big believer of finishing, not at your top, but certainly before things go downhill. And, training started becoming a bit of a struggle. But again, there was a coaching change at Quins. Gustard came in, who again is a great bloke, who I got on really well, but he did not want to play me. He did not like me as a player. So I ended up starting to, play a lot less, and it coincided with a lot of very good young talent coming through at Quins. And, after that first season under Gustard, I kind of just looked at myself and I went, well, I think this is probably the moment to call it quits. I don't want to be remembered for the guy that's holding bags for the last year of his contract. And I want to be remembered for the guy that scored something like 30 tries in 60 games for Quins. I'm just pulling that out of my hat. I have no idea what the actual stat is. But I don't want to be remembered for just hanging on for the money. And I went to see Gustard and I went, mate, I'm done. I'm not coming back next season. And he was incredibly understanding, and we came to a pretty good resolution, because I had a year left on my contract. And again, I think Quins is always going to be a team and a club close to my heart, but I think all my clubs probably will be. I wouldn't say I've had a lot of clubs, but for Newcastle to give me the chance to come over and play professional rugby in the first place. I was the first ever Dutch professional rugby player, so that in itself was really quite special, and I'll be forever grateful to John Fletcher and Peter Walton at the time, to then get my chance with Edinburgh through Andy Robinson and get handed an international cap by him as well is just amazing. And to finish my career at Quins at a club that is so well regarded in worldwide rugby, again, was nice. And it also kind of made the circle go full round, coming back to England and prove myself in the Premiership and showing that I can do it against the best was satisfying. And I think, that all probably played a role in me saying, I'm not going to stick around for another year. Why would I want to do this? I'd prepared for quite a long time for life after rugby. I've always been very proactive. I've studied, I've done work experience. I'm very heavily involved in property now, but also then. So I think it was easier for me knowing that there was something waiting for me. I had a plan. I wanted to get out, and I've never looked back. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah,
good stuff.
It's been an incredible career. I mean, we're just looking at the stats here. It's 298 games played, 135 tries. I don't think there'll be many players that have played at the level that you have that have scored they've got a better ratio than that. yeah, quite incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed it. And, looking back, a lot of pundits probably say, he wasn't very good in defence. That's probably why, for instance, I wouldn't have made a Lions squad, even though I was close once or twice. But I was an attacking winger. I wanted to be known for try scoring. I didn't want to be known for defending. I didn't like defending, which is probably why I wasn't very good at it. I loved attacking.
Attack's the
ball in
best form
hand.
of defence anyway, isn't it? So
Well, exactly.
who needs to defend when
that's
you
actually
score?
John Fletcher quote that.
Is it?
But it's I was hugely physical in attack. It's not that it was the physical side of defending. I just wasn't very good at it, and that's probably why I didn't like it, and vice versa. But I wanted to be remembered as a winger that scored a lot of tries, and I've certainly done that.
Good stuff. Well, thanks very much for that, Tim. It's a great insight to a great career. And
thank you.
We're going to finish off with your ultimate 15. Now, our only rule for our ultimate 15s is you have to be in the team yourself.
Fine.
So,
Fine.
so you have
no issue with that.
You have to give us 14 players. So let's hear who's the very best you've ever played with.
God, this is tricky. 15 is an easy one. Matt Burke.
Oh,
absolutely phenomenal. Like, came to Newcastle. I think it was Premiership Player of the Year every year he was here. He was unbelievable.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he was a great bloke to speak to as well.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. His stories, that's for another time. Anyway, yeah, Matt Burke, 14. That's a really tricky one. I'm going to come back to 14.
No problem.
13, probably Matthew Tate, maybe? In his prime, he was unbelievable. When he was at 13 for Newcastle, as a young boy, he was unstoppable.
Yeah.
Really, really unbelievable. 12, Jamie Roberts, easy, world class. 11, I'll have to obviously name myself, which is not a huge issue, but 10, Johnny Wilkinson, no doubt. Don't have to explain that one.
Yep. 9,
Danny Kerr, amazing, just as good with his feet as he is with his hands, off both feet, incredible player.
Yeah.
8. Now, 8's a tricky one for me. Probably Natani Talai, who was Fiji captain the game where I scored where I made my debut and I scored 2 tries. But I played with him at Edinburgh, and he was just unstoppable when he felt like it. He was unbelievable. 7, Chris Robshaw. Yeah, Chris Robshaw. Is he 7?
That's a fair shout.
Yeah, just, world class, doesn't talk a lot, does everything by the way he plays rugby, just grafter. 6. Tricky one. 6. What about, Johnny Beatty probably is an 8, but can I stick him at 6?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Stick him at 6. Great guy, still speak to him on a weekly basis. Great footballer. And just good, great player in his prime. Again, he was unstoppable. 4, James Horwell, ex-Australia captain, great lad, probably a better rugby player. 5, Richie Gray. Yeah, let's put Richie Gray in there. 2 huge second rows. Unbelievable on the line out, and Lion again speaks for itself. Now, front row always gets a bit tricky because I never know who plays on which side, but Joe Marler is obviously world class. And again, weirdest player I've ever played with. Incredibly strange character, but what a player. Number 2, Ross Ford, a very similar character, not to Joe Marler, but very, very similar to Chris Robshaw in that he leads from the front, let his rugby do the playing, the talking, and was captain when I made my debut for Fiji. And I remember I shared a room with him, and just before the game, the week leading up to the game, he did a press release in which he said that he had full confidence in me and that I was at home within the Scotland squad and that the Scots should accept me and whatever. So that was really nice. Number 3 is a tight head.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah, I never know. Probably Kyle Sinclair. Again, world class. Weird weird guy in that he's incredibly. He's a proper gangster. Like, you should actually be scared of him. He's amazing. And, great guy. I got on really well with him when I was down at Quins. But, as you probably saw in that Lions tour last year or the year before, he was monumental. Very good player.
Yeah.
Still need to give you a 14, don't I?
Who's have you got a couple of players in your mind? Who's in there?
Well, no. Who do I have on my mind? I've got quite a few players on my mind, but none that I really want to nominate, because two of them were my competition for Scotland, so I'm certainly not going to nominate those. Who have I got on my mind?
Who was on the opposite wing for Edinburgh all those years?
Yeah, a variety of players, not one that I could really single out. At Quins, there was Marlon Yard, who was a really good rugby player, but struggled with fitting into a rugby team. You know what? Sean Lamont. He's played on the opposite side of me. 100 plus time capped Scotland international, and actually ended up playing a lot of 13 when I played for Scotland. But great guy, so welcoming, always helping younger players, and just one of the nicest guys. But also an amazing player.
Excellent. Well, that's another cracking team. We've had some excellent teams over the past few weeks, from Jamie Noon, Mike McCarthy, and now this one. Yeah. So
Mike McCarthy, did I make Mike's team or not? He put Tommy Bowen, didn't
he? His team was very Leinster centric.
And I bet he put Tommy in as well. I don't know. Mike's a bit of a strange one. I went on a trip to Bermuda with him a couple of years ago, a rugby charity trip. Hands down, weirdest guy I've ever known.
More so weird. Joe Martha.
Yeah, way weirder. In a different way as well. Just strange. He was once, when I played a game with him for Newcastle, and he was on the bottom of a rug, and he started screaming these weird things. Like, ah! So the referee stopped the game, thinking he was in pain, and he got up and just smiled. He was like, "You all right?" And just walked off. Strangest guy.
Oh, yeah, I can't wait to tell him that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Tim, thanks very much for coming on. It's been great to chat with you, and some cracking stories there as well.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, guys.
No problem at all.
Thanks very much, Tim.
Cheers, bye-bye.
All the best. Bye. That's a wrap on episode 6, everyone. Thanks once again for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's chat with Tim as much as we did. Thanks once again for your ongoing support of the Northern Rugby Podcast channel as well. So keep hitting those like and subscribe buttons while you follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, or YouTube. We'll see you guys next time for episode 7.